See so many of you in the room, networking away. I'm sort of a bit loath to stop the conversation, but we do have quite an important agenda to get through. But hopefully I'll be able to catch up with many of you in the break times. It's really nice. It's so nice to have a face-to-face. So I'm going to start with an apology. I had my COVID booster jab earlier this week, and in typical style I woke up this morning with a sore throat. And two thoughts went through my head. The first one was, oh my God, am I going to have a Theresa May moment where I'm going to be handed a P60 and things are going to fall off the wall? And then I realised that I was in the very capable hands of the HFMA, so that wouldn't happen. And my second thought was a bit of a wistful moment where I remembered what it was like to have a Prime Minister with integrity. So, political spiel done. The housekeeping, and bear with me on this one, there are no planned emergency practices during the conference. So if you hear a siren, please leave through the signed exits. In order to respect the speakers, and you have some brilliant speakers in front of you today, please ensure that your mobile phones are on silent. But I do appreciate that you all have very busy day jobs, and I know many people will have to duck in and out of this. If you do need assistance, please see a member of the event team, either in the room, you can see them towards the back, or out at the registration desk. And if you have any questions, and I will talk you through when there's time for questions, there'll be roaming mics. So raise your hand, a member of the team will be over, and please introduce yourself. We will be live streaming today, so therefore can I remind all speakers to speak into the microphones when presenting, and if you haven't got a lapel mic, please check that everyone can hear you. So I'm just going to check at the back, because you did give me one of these mics as well. What do you need me to do? Am I good on the lectern? Right, I'll stick to the lectern then. So, I'm going to start off today's event launching the London Finance Academy, or the London Finance Development Strategy. Let's go with this one. My name is Hannah Whitty. For those who don't know me, I'm the Chief Finance Officer at Central and North West London, and I'm also the current Chair of the London Finance Development Board. Now, this is a board that's been through a few iterations in terms of names. It started as a talent board, it went to a Finance Academy board. We may not have completely nailed the name right through the slides, so if it appears as something different, bear with us. I was kind of hoping that Peter Ridley would be here so that he could tell me definitively what the name should be of this board, but I'm going to call it the Development Board for today. So, this all started from One NHS Finance, and I know that many of you will be familiar with this, but just as a quick recap, when Julian Kelly joined as the CFO of NHS C&I, he brought with him largely an infrastructure that we'd had, and I say we because I used to be a civil servant, in the government finance profession. Had a great deal of ideas and energy around creating one NHS finance community. So there was a big opportunity to contribute to shaping this, and we had 30,000 contributions, or almost 30,000 contributions from over 3,000 individuals. And we have used that to develop a finance development strategy, both nationally and regionally. This is the vision that came out from the conversation about One NHS Finance. Now, I'm not going to read it because there's way too many words on that screen. I'm hoping that everyone who is streaming into this is seeing the slides. But I'll pause and let you read that. I feel it maybe could have been slightly punchier, but there's a lot that we need to do in this agenda. So some key words in there: diverse, working together, innovators and problem solvers, collaborating across systems. And you'll hear much more on this agenda across the course of the day. The values and ambition that came out: collaborative, fair, patient-focused, innovative, inclusive and accountable. I don't think they'll surprise anyone. They're really key core values that sit at the heart of this. And three key themes emerged. So there was a theme around developing our community, and the platform we're doing that through is Future Focus Finance, and Bimal will be on stage this morning to talk more about that. Developing our people, which is through the National Finance Academy, and Hardev will be on the stage talking a bit more about that. and developing our systems and processes through a finance innovation forum. And we also have Gus, who's leading that locally, to say a bit more about that. So, as a result of the conversation, 7 regional boards were created. And the idea of the regional boards is to oversee at regional level the delivery of this national agenda. So specifically, this is the EDI Action Plan, the NHS Finance Development Strategy, and local delivery of the One NHS Finance programmes. We've just been in a meeting this morning. It's actually one of my favourite meetings. I always feel quite energised as a result of that. So we have quite a good cross-section of people on this. We have the majority of the integrated care systems represented. We've got one where I'm waiting for the confirmation. We've also got all of our local delivery partners represented. We've got our London leads on the national programmes represented. And we were having a conversation this morning about how we can ensure that we've got representation from across the finance community, particularly in our band 2 to 5 staff. So we'll be looking to onboard that as part of the board with responsibility for overseeing the development of this programme. So we are responsible for the local development priorities, and I'm going to talk you through those London priorities and the key ways that we hope to achieve those in a minute. And each regional director of finance is responsible for ensuring an appropriate board is established in the region. Anne Johnson has done that, and she has asked me, or it's my immense privilege, to be chairing this group at this point in time. So what does this mean for London? So I'm going to try and talk about how this fits together, and I love a few pictures in this. So right at the top of this, in the One NHS Finance agenda, is the Finance Leadership Council, and we've got Caroline, who represents London with a seat on that council. I think you're actually meeting later today, aren't you? It's a day of trying to cram in the meetings. We have the 3 big national programmes, which I've talked about with the named leads. And then we've got the Finance Leadership Board in the centre of that, looking at the regional delivery, but really key bits at the side of this, and actually I don't think we've quite got all the bits that we need, but the Inclusion and Diversity Ambassadors Network, and we have Ranjana here to present on that today, and then the London Value Maker Board, which Karen leads for us. So all of this comes together, not necessarily as neatly as it should do, but it's a work in progress. In that London Regional Delivery Board. So we have, I'm just going to get my notes because again there's a lot of words on this piece of paper. So in terms of our regional strategy, aims and vision, the vision that we have agreed and signed up to as a result of the conversation that we had across London, so we replicated the national conversation with all organisations in London. And the vision that we've agreed off the back of that is to create, develop and support a leading NHS finance community for London that reflects the population we serve and supports the delivery of the London vision. And we have 5 key aims identified. So the first is to ensure that finance has a diverse workforce at every level that represents the population that we serve. And broadly speaking, the delivery board is going to focus on grades 8C and above, and we have now an infrastructure of ICS talent boards, which sit below this, which in a region the size of London is absolutely vital, and they are tasked at looking at all other grades and the diversity. And I can see some of the leads in the room actually, and I know we're starting to look at the census information that we have around that and working out what the actions need to be at ICS level. We want to build more inclusive cultures in our finance departments with a particular focus on improving recruitment processes to make sure that they are fair, and secondment processes. I think for too long, secondments have depended on who you know and how you network. And in particular, maybe CFOs contacting each other to say, well, I've got this individual. And we may have got the right people, but it's not a particular transparent process. So we want to make sure that we have visibility of secondment opportunities across our systems and across London that are available to all staff who wish to move around and gain different experience. We want to ensure that finance staff at all levels are supported and that they have equal access to support to progress their careers. And the primary vehicle for that is the National Finance Academy, which is the one-stop shop for accessing the development offer, and Hardev will say more about that. We want to take an inclusive and consistent approach to nurturing our talent. And we want to ensure that across London we are working as one finance community, focusing on collaboration and sharing knowledge, learning, ideas, innovation and experience. There is so much innovation in this region. I'm very lucky and I hear about it all the time in this role, but it's happening in pockets and we're not very good at sharing this. We all seem to be grappling with the same problems all the time, and we should be listening to others who've done some work in the space and seeking to share that knowledge really, rather than all trying to deal with the same things. So, how are we going to achieve that? Because it's quite a big agenda. Now, one of the key ways that we will do this in London is through the ICS boards. And they will take forward the delivery of local priorities and plans. And already I know that a couple of the ICSs have sent out surveys and are working on their local priorities. So the regional board is seeking to support them, but also trying to look at what needs to be done at regional level and what needs to be done at system level. We're seeking to promote NHS finance as a career in our communities. We all work in anchor institutions. That actually is quite a big responsibility. And we can provide phenomenal career opportunities for the communities around us. And at a point where we struggle so much with the workforce in the NHS, it really makes sense that we would be reaching into the local communities that we have to really promote NHS finance as a career. We've also got to ensure that we do that in a way that covers the whole of the population. So we are seeking to increase the diversity of our workforce at the same time. We have the National Finance Academy and the London Finance Academy. There is a particular focus on equality, diversity and inclusion. So you'll see much more training material coming out on that. We're seeking to increase our development offer. So we already have a huge amount of schemes available to people, a really strong technical offer, I think, but perhaps not as strong on the softer skills as we need to be. So there are programmes that have been developed looking at some of this, and two key ones on this are the Going Beyond programme, which has been really powerful actually in terms of getting people to apply to a, Hardev, are you going to say a bit more about this one? No, that's okay. A course that is developed by CFOs, run by CFOs and targeted at some of the staff where we have poorer representation in our senior grades. And we also have the sponsorship offer. And it's a bit of a plea to everyone in this room. I know in London we are short of sponsors at the moment. So if you haven't heard about it, we'll send out some material. Please get involved, because the feedback that we're getting from the relationships at the moment is it's an incredibly powerful opportunity for staff. And we're also hoping that all of the providers and commissioners across London will reach level 1 PGP and FFF accreditation, which just gives us that basically assurance that we've got a standard in place in terms of the offer across London. We have a few organisations now that are starting to look at level 2 as well. So we're on that journey, and we only have a handful of organisations now that aren't at level 1. So that's one of our priorities. So the delivery model, I've got two brilliant deputies on this agenda. Jenny, it's over in the... And Helen, unfortunately, describes herself as having the lurgy today, so Helen's unable to make it. And we're really looking at the talent management and staff development side, and Helen is the SDN lead, so that gives us a really good link into a key delivery partner there. I don't know if you'll be able to see this in detail, but I think we'll get the slides out afterwards. So this is a snapshot, probably slightly out of date because they're moving at pace now, about the ICS talent boards, who is chairing them, or who is our lead contact at the moment, although I noticed on North Central London we haven't got the right contact, we haven't got the right lead on there, because I think, Adrian, 3 of you have taken that one now. So we'll get this one just tweaked and updated, and it gives you a sense of what ICS talent boards are working on as their priorities. And finally, a bit of a plug for the Women in Leadership Network, which is, I think, an area where there's been loads of energy and enthusiasm. Lots of people volunteering to be part of this. So obviously looking at equality in gender. Some key work streams on that. How we support all staff around returning to work and flexible working, particularly after parental leave. And I think that is something that we've heard very, very clearly that we don't do well enough. Male allies are absolutely key. We've got a few really vocal ones in this space, but we're not going to succeed in this agenda. We're not going to succeed in any of our agendas unless we have allies helping us. Picture of leadership. So a plug again for the Women in Leadership profiles, and we'll send around a link to those. So those have been launched on the website, trying really to raise awareness of an absolutely brilliant group of CFOs who I have the privilege to be part of, and how we approach the CFO role. So a great snapshot, and Anne Johnson's in there amongst many people in this room, so some really great profiles. And looking at that talent management agenda and how we support people. So some detail there about how you can get involved in that if you'd like to. And we've also got key contacts listed here should you want to get more involved. Now, before I hand over to Hardev, I just really wanted to say a couple of things. That's a bit of a snapshot of what's going on, and you can't do justice to it in a series of slides. This stuff is important, and I'll give you an example of why it's important. And Caroline, sorry, you're going to get picked on again here now. So many of you will know that I was the CFO at RNOH before Caroline. When Caroline got appointed in RNOH, one of my more senior black female members of staff came into my office and said, "This is brilliant. This makes me realise that I can make it. And I have never felt like I can make it before." And that is what it means to people. Now, we will discharge our fiscal responsibilities. That's what we're paid to do. We will develop our staff because we care about that and because we are responsible for teams. But we have a really unique opportunity here to change the face of finance. And if we can do this, it will make a difference for our patients and for the next generation of finance leaders. And I want to implore everyone today to get involved in this. Because if we leave a legacy, that, I think, is the single most important legacy that we will leave. Thank you. Right. It says questions. I'm not going to take questions. I'm going to hand over to Hardev, and then hopefully this will sequence brilliantly. And then what we'll do is we'll take questions for any of the slots that you've heard this morning, which I will try my best to chair. Apparently I'm being added to a WhatsApp group so I can see the live feed for everyone listening at home. But over to Hardev.
Thanks, Hannah. Morning, everyone. I'm presuming you can hear me. Good. Hi, so I'm Hardev. I'm the, in this capacity, the chair for the National Finance Academy, and it's a real pleasure to be here helping to launch the Finance Development Board. Is that right? Yeah, which is great. And I've seen a lot of the work the Development Board has been doing, and I think with Hannah, Bimal, Gus, Lara, you've got some fantastic leaders there who will really make a difference. But I want to talk to you more about what is going on at the national level, but also how do we make the difference in London, okay? And for me, I grew up in Birmingham and I came to London, and there's some really interesting stats when I was coming to London that intrigued me about, well, London was always considered the most diverse city. And apparently there's, I was reading this morning that 45% of Londoners consider themselves to be white British, which is actually the smallest percentage in any region across the country. And there's 51% of Londoners are women, and 11% of Londoners consider themselves as having a disability. And then that number doubles for those who don't declare that they have a form of disability. So you can see the makeup of what it means to be part of London. Now, those are just three characteristics. But looking at the room and looking at your boards and your leadership, you can see why things like the development board, about your roles, are really important to make that difference. We heard from Hannah the vision and the point about we want to reflect the population we serve. And then importantly, you said, at every level. We're not there yet. We're not there. Okay. So what is it that the National Finance Academy is trying to do to help on this? So we have a number of initiatives and schemes, and I'm hoping many of these are familiar to you. We heard about the sponsorship program, and we know there's lots of work going on about collecting the right type of data as well. And we have lots of key opportunities. I just wanted to flag up here the talent pool. So we do have a framework that's developing around talent management, and we recently ran our first cohort of a talent pool, and London was really well represented, which is great, and you can see that the pipeline is strong. We've actually found that we were oversubscribed for that, and actually what we're noticing is that London is full of this vibrant talent, which is a really positive story for us. We also have tools like the National Finance Curriculum and programs at every level. And here's an example which I'm not expecting you to be able to read, but there are programs across from bands 2 to 4 all the way up to senior leadership. And the National Finance Academy has developed these programs, and they're there for us to use. What's really positive is, again, all these programs are really high in demand, and we're finding that we're putting on more and more programs to meet the level of demand. So our staff, our community really wants to develop, really want to progress, and it's up to us to open those doors of opportunity. Now, you being all finance leaders, I know you like a bit of numbers and a bit of competition. So this is what it looks like when you look at the take-up for London. And so my challenge really for the development board in London is, where do you sit in terms of those numbers? Are you comfortable that, for instance, you'll notice Northwest are always high on everything, yes, they do that a lot, but they're really well established and have some good mechanisms in place, and we're learning from them. We heard about sponsors and sponsees, so we have at the moment 45 sponsees, 42 sponsors in London, okay? Whereas in Northwest they have 70 sponsees and 64 sponsors, okay? Is that good, bad, indifferent? What are your thoughts? Okay, so I'm hoping the development board will be able to look at this and challenge itself about where does it want to go to next. Are we pushing hard enough on this? And you can see actually there's some other areas, other regions which have big issues about actually what is that uptake, what is driving those issues. And for me, it is really important to really emphasize what Hannah was saying about it's everyone's agenda and it's everyone's legacy, that this approach about being inclusive, taking an approach where we develop our staff, we open those doors, we've got the right tools here, how can we make it happen? The National Finance Academy is not an institution. For me, the National Finance Academy is a movement. It's a movement of improvement. It's a movement of development. It's really trying to access and tap into the talent we have. It's also trying to address some of these uncomfortable issues that previously we've always shied away from. So I remember 3 years ago standing in this forum with Sandra Easton, who was the Child West CFO, putting up a slide about why there's this bottleneck in CFOs coming through. And there was some gasps in the audience when we were putting up some really hard-hitting data and quotes. But we're past that now. And now it's more about the actions and what we're doing to make that difference. And what we find in the National Finance Academy is there's a number of other professions in the NHS are asking us questions about how are you doing this? Why are you so successful in delivering on this? And I think we're successful to a point. We still have a long way to go. And it reminds me of a story which I just want to reflect on. I noticed in finance in particular, there's quite a few people in the room who enjoy running, so you might like this story. But has anyone ever heard of a female runner called Sophie Power? No. Good. Okay. So Sophie is a lady. She does lots of really long runs. So she's an ultra marathon runner. And back in 2018, she hit the headlines because there's a photo of her that went viral. She was doing this ultra marathon run, and it was abroad, and it's a picture of her having a break. But what she was doing was she was actually breastfeeding her child in the middle of this race. Okay, and everyone started asking questions. Why were you breastfeeding in the middle of a race? And it transpires that back in 2014, she applied to go onto that race, which was her ultimate desire. And she managed to get a place. And she became pregnant. And she told the organisers, and they said, well, we can't defer your place. You have to start all over again and apply. And it took her 4 years to get onto that place again. And she fell pregnant again. And she thought, there's no way I'm going to miss this opportunity. Now, that was in 2018. Those people who like the running will know about the Boston Marathon. The Boston Marathon is a highly acclaimed race. It still has that same policy, where if you fall pregnant, you're not allowed to defer your entry. You have to go, you're cancelled, and you don't even get a refund. Okay? But if you're injured, you can defer your entry. Okay. Now, Sophie took this issue up and she created something called She Races, trying to really promote more female long distance running. And she said, there's lots of issues to deal with it. Why is it whenever you see the photo of long distance running at the start line, it's the really athletic men who are barged their way to the front? Why is it when you collect your T-shirt at the end, the sizes of the T-shirts are all male sizes? They don't cater for women. And she started this movement, and it's still going strong today. And she believes that everyone who's a runner has a responsibility to really promote this. And for me, I'm trying to emulate that issue about actually we're trying to create this movement. We need to push these issues. We've got a long way to go. But I do think with Hannah and colleagues on the development board, we're going to make this, and we're going to do really, really well. We do have a strong offering. We have, as you mentioned, the Going Beyond programme. We have programs around the deputy CFOs, talent board, and we've now got a new program around the first time in post for new CFOs. So we are creating the right environment. We have the tools. We have the people. I think I'm asking us in London, have we got the momentum and the movement to make this happen? Thank you very much.
They're not for me, questions. Right. So I'm going to start with this.
For me, the NHS is so important for everybody. It touches all of our lives at various points in our lives, and for me that is what brings me to work every day, knowing that what I do makes a difference.
I love being able to work for the NHS because even though I am not frontline, I know that I'm giving back every day.
It's the NHS, okay? So this is a world-beating institution.
Choosing a career in NHS finance it's about your local community.
Primarily I was struck by how it lined up with my core values.
I guess it's about helping people.
Working for the NHS during the pandemic it is a privilege. You feel very proud to be working in the NHS.
As a finance professional, I didn't see myself as being frontline, but actually I was really part of the frontline response, so I was the emergency preparedness lead.
If we don't do what we can do, then the doctors and nurses can't treat our patients, so we know that in a way we are still contributing.
When you've got something so unimaginable happening, to be able to say that you've done something to help that situation is really important.
In terms of supporting frontline services, we're involved in investment business cases. It's about helping to make that business case as powerful as it possibly can. If it's about managing resources, it's about supporting those operational managers to get the best out of those resources. We want to treat as many patients as possible.
We facilitate things to move in the right direction. I think when it works really well, you will have a finance person at the heart of all of those decisions.
I know that I have supported the organisation in accessing funding for new buildings that have really benefited patients in Merseycare.
I'm helping nationally, and also I've got the ability to speak globally on what we do and deliver a real message that the NHS is one of the most amazing organisations. My advice to somebody wanting to start out their career in NHS finance is be open-minded.
Come for work experience, I would say look at undergraduate opportunities, look at different entry levels into our organisations and try out and see what you think.
Do a little bit of research.
My advice really is join the NHS finance career. It's a great path to be on. It can lead to all sorts of opportunities.
Don't fall into the trap of, well, it's not in my job remit, because that's where our life begins, is when we do the other duties away from what we normally do, that you can get a real value, real experience, and hopefully have an enjoyable career. And hope to fall into the trap of, well, it's not in my job remit, because that's where our life begins, is when we do the other duties.
Right, I knew this would fail me. Just need to move on to the next slide. There we go. So why do I show you that? Firstly, I'm Bimal Patel. I'm the Deputy Chief Exec and Chief Finance Officer at North Middlesex Hospital, and also the lead for Future Focus Finance. I wanted to show you that because Future Focus Finance for me means about a career in NHS finance and something to be proud of. And I saw when I was looking at you all while you're watching that, you actually started smiling about the things that you've been doing in finance and what finance actually means to our organisations, to our patients. And it's not only about doctors and nurses, we play a massive role in the NHS. With that in mind, so there are 5 key programmes for FFF. One around supporting our staff, one around promoting careers in NHS finance, one around networking and sharing good ideas, helping others and understand NHS finance, and then the 5th one is around making NHS finance a great place to work. So I'm going to talk to you about some of those and also the key things that are coming up. So we've got a new website, that's a reasonably new website, up and running. We've had 5,000 hits and 2,000 kind of different users. I won't embarrass anyone checking if anyone here has used it, but it's a really useful website to make sure that you can look at opportunities, vacancies, programs and events and things that are coming up all in one place. What we've got coming up around promoting NHS finance careers, we've got live stream events to support individuals in applications and showcase for different roles and entry routes into NHS. We've got a whole load of career stories, and actually I think Sophie is wandering around trying to get you all to discuss your career stories, so please do go and see her and talk through those. We'll have quite a few virtual work experience guides as well. One of the things that I will say, that one of the things around Future Focus Finance is around networking and sharing good ideas. One of the things I will read out is Value Maker. So a Value Maker is someone who is committed to making a difference and is passionate about the power of finance in supporting the delivery of excellence in patient care. You don't have to work in finance or commit to taking on additional work. We just want to harness the power of a group of enthusiastic people to bring about positive change. Now, I hope you're all value makers, and I hope you all signed up to be a value maker. But if you haven't, please go on the website and sign up, as we do have things coming through. So we have a Value Maker annual conference coming up on the 15th of November, and there's still time to sign up to nominate people for awards. And there's actually something called MS Teams Network online now. So there's groups of like-minded individuals that you can connect with. That, say for example, you wanted to share wanted to understand how people are presenting something to clinicians. There's a network that you can actually join through MS Teams. We have links to that on the website as well. Supporting our staff. So some of you may have heard of the Boorman Review. That talks about staff health and well-being. Now, it's really important that we make sure our staff are looking after themselves and we are able to look after our staff, because actually that makes a massive difference to the NHS, and not just finance but also across the organisation. That also means there's less sick days. It also means that there's an improvement in work. What we have coming up, we have health and wellbeing webinars in the autumn, so wellbeing skills for remote working, managing stress and building resilience on the 23rd of November, and creative positive team dynamics. What we don't have much of in London is health and wellbeing champions. So we have 5 in London, and can you imagine, you'll all be in a situation where your teams have said to you, we've got a lot of people going off with stress, or finding it difficult to cope with their workload at the moment. We have 5 health and wellbeing champions across London. That's just really not good enough for us. There's information on the website that says what the role entails, but if you need to speak to anyone, Sophie's also available to talk through that. There's a health and wellbeing conference on the 13th of January. It's Friday the 13th of January. There is also an escape room. So anyone that did the escape rooms virtual last week, you'll be able to have a go again on the 13th, or if you didn't, it's a really good thing to do. One of the things that is really useful on the website when you do go on there, there's a whole section on demystifying NHS finance. So if you've got anything you want to talk to clinicians about, there's lots of information that shows you how you can do that, and we need to work through breaking down the them and us culture in again with finance people and the clinical front line. There's a whole series of FACE showcases. So FACE is finance and clinical educators. We continue to run our finance for clinicians and managers courses face-to-face and online. For those of you that really like patient level costing, like myself, there's a relaunch of EVO, Engagement, Value and Outcome. So we can look at patient costs and look at how to improve our efficiencies as a result of that. Making NHS finance a great place to work. I think I started with that, so I'm not going to really go too much into detail with that. But we talked about accreditation for FFF Level 1. There are some organisations that aren't there. I think we all agree it's unacceptable where we've got the basic level of accreditation hasn't been met across our organisation. So we are really supporting teams and organisations into getting that to that Level 1. We're not far away. But you do have to get your promoted good practice first, because actually you need to be accredited with the CCAB bodies. I said the Value Maker Awards are open, and we have staff development induction on the 3rd of November. So what do we need? This is the stats. So these are the stats that you may not have seen. So we've got 80% FFF Level 1, 85% PGP, 205 Value Makers. So please do go back to your organisations. Value Maker isn't a role, it's a network of people, like-minded people that want to actually improve value within the NHS. We've got 67 FACE. If you think about what a finance and clinical educator is, actually think about the role. your teams will do that every day. Your management accounts team will do that every day. They'll talk to clinicians. It's just that we need those like-minded people to come together in the network. We will have a conversation about inclusion and diversity. We've now got 15 health and wellbeing ambassadors. Again, still probably not enough. And as Hardev said earlier, we are competitive. We're London. Northwest always has a lot more than London, and I want us to improve on some of those things. And if there are areas that you don't know what they're for and what they mean, and what people don't always understand the role, please just let us know. What do we need from you? So I've said join the Value Maker Network, save the date in the 15th of November, celebrate your success and send in thank you to colleagues on hashtag NHS Finance Thank You. I said nominate Value Maker Awards and become a health and wellbeing champion. Become a diversity inclusion champion, ambassador. Again, join the MS Teams virtual networks. Level 1 to 2 accreditation. So I know we've got 2 organisations in London. Let's try and learn from those 2 organisations and see if we can get more organisations into level 2 and then potentially level 3. I think we've got Auditor Finance Director declarations signed off, although we've just realised this morning that as people have moved into different roles, actually it's for the director, not for the organisation. So we will need to send out and get some more signed off. I haven't got time for questions. See you later. Cheers, guys.
Right, let's see if I can work this. Yes, I can. So, hello everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm looking at the slide to remind myself. Gus Heafield, I'm Chief Financial Officer at South London and Maudsley Foundation Trust. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm really pleased to be in the room with people, but also the people on the live feed, because I think this is such an important agenda, the launch of the development board, as Hannah said. It's just a fantastic opportunity we've got to change the face of NHS finance in London. This is also a really important area for me in terms of innovation, because I think why are we doing it? Why we're doing it is because there is already lots of innovation out there that I don't think we're capturing and understanding as well as we could. Our teams do fantastic things every day to overcome problems and challenges. So how do we build on that? How do we really as Hardev said, tap into and access the talent that we've got across our organisations amongst our colleagues in the finance teams? We do it because we're all learning all the time, in my view. We all need to keep learning from each other and how to do things differently. But fundamentally, it was as in those videos, I think, about why we're here is actually to make the team and the service as efficient as possible to maximise the benefit for our organisations and ultimately maximise the benefit for our patients and our local populations. So a really important agenda. I just thought I'd start off by just saying a bit about the national programme. So what it's seeking therefore to do is to collect, peer review and then publish the innovations that we know are out there amongst our colleagues in the finance teams. We're doing that, as I said, to improve efficiency, but also to provide a better service. And ultimately, it's about that learning agenda. So when you make a submission through the website, you'll get a peer review by 3 anonymous, the peer review is anonymous, 3 peer reviewers who then will make recommendations whether to develop the proposal further or whether it should be published. And I think what's really interesting when you look at the breadth, it's not just about technology or innovation like robots and so on, but one of the schemes that really impressed me was actually a volunteering scheme where the finance team were volunteering, and actually the London Trust, I'll name now St George's, London Trust, where they're volunteering from the finance department to go out and serve meals and do things that have a direct sort of clinical patient interaction. So those are the sort of things I think we should be looking at promoting amongst our community. So just a little about the way that the program's developed. So I think we started by looking at innovation. So what was the problem? What were you trying to solve, and what you've done about it? Some fantastic submissions, as I say. We're looking now to actually capture more about, so what are the problems? So if we can really capture those, understand them, do more work to actually look at common issues and problems across our communities. How can we then use the national resources as appropriate to try and solve those and address them? And particularly trying to capture ideas as well around how those might be solved. So you don't need to have got to the point where you've got the innovation embedded, which was one of the original requirements, but you can actually just be submitting ideas and the problems you're seeking to address. So in the programme overall, I think there are 48 now peer-reviewed innovations available on the website. We've done that in about 10 months. There's an interesting breakdown around the country. I think in this case, North East and Yorkshire seem to be winning, and I'll come on to the London position in a second. The cohort 4 is now open, but it closes on the 3rd, and there'll be a further cohort nearer Christmas. We've also launched launched and completed the 4-month finance skills, the software skills for finance staff, and that's been hugely popular, over 100 delegates, and it's a permanent forum for people to share experience about particular systems and software, virtual learning, and some of the examples are up there. We've also got a national programme going on around the automation of the PFR returns, and that's been with a broad cross-section of colleagues from around the country to automate single, shareable, low-tech solution to cut out some of the manual and interventions and some of the spreadsheets that people were using. That is being rolled out, as I understand it, at month 4. Some of you may well have been involved in that. And also looking at the art of the possible, which is around how we might use better automation better, to actually do some of the mundane tasks that we're all have to do on a routine basis. And we're starting to see some of the innovations that might bring. Certainly in our organisation, we were able to use automation robots to actually upload data on the back of the recovery programme when we lost our data system, an electronic record, for the last month and a half. So there are real opportunities there for development and innovation. Where perhaps we might be slightly disappointed is that I know there's lots of innovation. As Hannah said, lots of people getting in touch about innovations that they have in place. But as far as London concerned, we are only reflected at 8. There's only 8 so far in the cohorts from across the patch. And I think we probably could do better. We know that they're out there, so how do we increase that sharing and that engagement? But we have got people who are volunteering around the automation process, peer reviewers, and soft skills volunteers. So that's a challenge for us all as a community, I think, about how we improve that engagement and get more involved. And there's lots more to come. There's some things that are quite technical based, coming around accessible tools, as it says up there, supporting value-based decision making, linking in activity systems and finance. I think I'm as interested, if not more interested, in how that we use this to facilitate some of the things we talked about earlier. So how do we use it to facilitate some of the networking? How do we use it to celebrate some of the successes and innovation in our teams? So that is the key for me. It's a way of actually reflecting the talent that we've got out there. It's a way of actually building networks across our communities. And that's not just senior staff, that's throughout the whole of the hugely talented and diverse pool of colleagues that we've got around our teams. Whilst I recognise we've got more to do on the diversity, certainly at senior levels. So how can you get involved? There are a number of areas: sharing problem ideas, sharing problems, sharing ideas, becoming a peer review innovator, signing up to be a peer reviewer, and also things like the software skills training services, and also into automation. So please do get involved yourselves, but really the challenge is creating the time and space, I think, for our teams to get involved in this, to demonstrate what they're achieving and what they're dealing with, and how they've been so creative and innovative to get around some of those challenges, and how we can together learn. I think Hannah said earlier on that I don't think we've been that good at the dissemination. So you can look on the website for those 8 published peer-reviewed innovations, but I don't know whether we've really got to grips with how we learn from each other most effectively yet. And maybe that's a role for the ICS teams and the local talent boards, but it's certainly a role for us in the room and the development board as a whole. So thank you very much.
Okay. Hi, so hopefully you can hear me. My name is Ranjana. It's really lovely to be invited to speak with you today. You might not have been expecting me. I'm subbing in for Yarlini. I am a costing accountant in Kingston Hospital, but I also work as an I&D ambassador. That's an inclusion and diversity ambassador within South West London. And so really I wanted to use today to give you an overview of some of the things that we've been doing as an ambassador network across London, but also share with you perhaps some of the challenges in the hope that I can kind of get across some of the support we probably need from the people here today. So just quickly, who, what are I&D ambassadors? Well, we are a network of volunteers. We are spread right across the region, as you've heard, and that is replicated across all regions nationally. So I believe the count is now somewhere near to 300 across the country, which is brilliant. We work collaboratively in those groups, and we do try to really drive commitment to the EDI initiatives that have been put in play. And we also kind of check and challenge them. I don't know if that was our remit, but that's what we do. And so I really like to think of us as being the boots on the ground. We are not all leaders in our organisation in that traditional sense of the hierarchy. And, that presents some challenges, and I'll talk about that a bit more. But we are really active, passionate volunteers. We really do put a lot of energy into what we do. We're really motivated. And we do want to see that these schemes work, particularly for our local communities. So, as you probably know already, the I&D ambassadors are one in a really long line of strategic initiatives, and we're supporting all of that, and that's what we see our remit to be. Ultimately, we are looking to create this inclusive culture. We're looking to create a diverse culture, and we want to see equity of outcomes for all of our staff. Now, I just want to touch on what we mean by equity and how that might be different to equality. I like to use this bicycle analogy, and if you've heard me speak before in my team, you've probably heard this analogy before too. But basically, the idea of the bicycle is, you know, it's a pretty efficient form of transport, really economical, very environmental, wonderful. If we gave that to every one of our employees, would they all get to where they need to go? Would they all fulfill their potential? Or do we actually need to recheck ourselves and adapt that bicycle for all of those different individuals? Do we support their individual needs? And so are there systematic changes? You know, can we change the height, the seat, the levers, etc.? Are there systematic changes that we can do that are sustainable, but just better support our staff get to where they are meant to be? So most of our work recently has been underlined by the National EDI Strategy. There is a link on the slide, and it's a very comprehensive document. It's probably too much for me to go into in a lot of detail now. Hopefully most of you are familiar with it, but it's got 6 themes, and under each of those themes are really strong, smart objectives. I thought I would just focus on 1 or 2 of these and give you an idea of what we've been up to. So one of the key themes in the plan is around leadership. There's actually a whole page of objectives dedicated to this theme. And one of those aims is to create an I&D network where every organisation in London has one I&D ambassador. And that probably sounds really, really easy and simple to do, but it's proved a lot more difficult. We don't have full representation yet, if we're being honest. And I mean, we're pretty close, but we're not there. And even where we do have representation, one of the things that's been really difficult is for those ambassadors to have the space and time to commit to the work we're trying to do. In some areas, we've probably been a bit shy about asking for support. I know that I'm guilty of that, even though Yolini's our chair. So perhaps there's an ambassador in your workplace that you could reach out to and just check in on what we've been doing. We're also really committed to developing our teams. And primarily we've been looking at the sponsorship scheme as one way of doing that. Again, here the scheme has an objective of having at least 2 sponsors per organisation, but we've questioned that slightly. We would actually like to see at least 1 sponsee per organisation go through that scheme over its lifetime. We've been keeping a really keen eye, in South West London at least anyway, on who the participants are and where they've come from. And one of the things we've noticed is there is a cluster of organisations that perhaps are benefiting more from the scheme than others. And we'd like to kind of help to address that. So we're looking how we can promote the scheme, target promotion maybe better, so that we get that coverage. In terms of future talent, we've noticed that some of our London organisations have placement schemes in place, and we've been working or talking to colleagues around this. I asked one of our colleagues to share the experience of one of their placement students, and I didn't get a photo for Tanya, unfortunately, but she had this to say. There's quite a lot of words there, but I'll give you a moment to read it. Particularly the bits in blue, I think, are worth dwelling upon. So for me, I think the most powerful statement was actually the fact that we've been able to give Tanya the ability to financially support herself through the rest of her qualification. Because for a lot of people, finances are one of the big barriers to getting qualified. So for me personally, that was the biggest takeaway. But in terms of, Kingston, we don't have a placement scheme. We've been looking at what we might do to replicate that. We've been asking our colleagues who do have them, have they seen the benefits they were expecting? Have they got the retention rates? If they've spent a year nurturing someone and they wanted to keep them, have they been able to do that? Have they got the pipeline? Have they got a long list of applicants all waiting at the door, trying to get the next spot, if that's what they were hoping for? And unfortunately, some of the data around this isn't really there. We're maybe not capturing it. The other thing I was talking this morning about was the fact that we could be using placement students who have been through the scheme to help promote it to other students. So it doesn't have to be the ambassadors that go out and talk in career fairs. It doesn't have to be members of staff. It could be people who've been through the scheme and have benefited from it. And we could be, where we have vacancies, targeting this group of individuals. So a database which collects this or tracks them through their careers could be really, really useful. So the next theme I wanted to cover was awareness. And as ambassadors, what we're trying to do is really support the communications plan and just really support their reach. So lots of us have just recirculated emails. I wanted to call out South East London because they shared that one of the things they've done is really stretched that ambition. I found this to be a really neat and efficient solution. So they've just auto-signed up everyone, or that's what they plan to do, so auto-sign up everyone in their organisations. So they just get the, the communications and they have to opt out if they don't want to. In Epsom and St Helier, they have a finance newsletter. I've got some extracts from it here, but I just wanted to kind of show how they've tried, to create a sense of community, share some of the things they've been doing, share their roles, give people a voice, and it's really easy for them to now go on and extend that to include national, regional plans, opportunities, job vacancies, etc. In terms of inclusivity training, it's obviously been around for some time. We've been working closely with the skills development networks. My colleague Afosa, for example, from Kingston, he's been working to revamp, I should say, the recruitment manager training, make sure that it's really fulfilling its aims here. And we've been able to challenge, so St George's, I'm going to call them out here, they've been challenging the fact that some of this training isn't standard package across in finance. It's not, it's not something that all employers are expected to do, but we are all expected to do fire safety. Why shouldn't that be something that we all do too in the same way? So they're trying to embed that as a standard thing. And in terms of sharing and listening, we're trying to support two-way communication. So again, from the centre, from national plans, from talent boards, presenting at things like this, letting you know what we've been up to. We're just trying to keep that conversation going. But I think the appeal for me to you guys in the room is to say, how do you support this in your teams? Do you have the forums? And I'm not saying that you don't, but some don't. Do you have forums where staff can get together, where they can feedback, where they can share their stories and their experience? Do they feel empowered to do so? Do you amplify those voices? Do you feed them back to the networks that exist? Does that rely on your ambassador? And I think that's one of the conundrums for me. So, we can talk really positively about lots of things that have been going on as a group, and there are still work schemes in place, but we have been doing this for some time. The ambassadors haven't existed necessarily, but the ideas behind this and the activity behind this has been going on for some time. But despite that, we don't really see a huge, uptick in stats. So the dial hasn't really changed. So what is it that makes, what do we do that helps really shift that dial? This is really cheeky of me, I appreciate this. I've borrowed a cartoon of lemmings and I've adapted it to fit my purpose. But I thought it just kind of spoke to what I was going to say next, which is, we can have schemes and we can have training platforms and we can push lots and lots of people through all of these. And so forgive me if this is a hard message to hear. But if all that happens is that they just fall through the gaps anyway, just more qualified than before, have we really done what we set out to do? And that's the challenge, isn't it? We need to measure what we're doing is actually really effective, not just how many we've managed to deliver. The other thing that I think is a real challenge for us as ambassadors, I've really mentioned it earlier, we are volunteers. A lot of the work we do is agile and it's iterative and it's building and it's layering. How do we sustain that momentum? How do we sustain that energy? How do you've got a real passionate group of people. We need that feedback. We need to be able to showcase, but we also need to work together. We need to see results, and some of those results will be medium to long term. How do we keep that network going? How do we keep us all working to the same aims all the time? That's, I think, going to be a challenge. Some of our groups haven't even had capacity to properly meet and work together. So it's already proving a challenge in terms of people's availability. So I don't have much more to say. There is the link on the 1NH Finance page. Please go ahead and read it. Do get in contact with your ambassador if you don't have one in your area. We're really looking for some. So please, encourage people to sign up and join us. I think we learn a lot from each other. And the other benefit for me personally that I've taken away is just being able to network with other colleagues. Not having been in the NHS all my career, that's something that I found is a barrier to just, being part of the organisation. So just even that is a positive benefit from the scheme. Thank you.
I'll be really, really quick just to allow time for questions. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Satiris Kyriakou and I look after the Skills Development Network for London. It should have been Helen Jameson, who's the chair of the SDN board, come and speak to you today. Who's the CFO for South West London now, ICB, and she sent her apologies. She was unwell last week and she couldn't come today. So I think the key message from speaking to her this week that she wanted me to get across to you was that SDM, which was Finance Skills Development, just a reminder that we rebranded a few years ago because we've also incorporated procurement and informatics skills development into our portfolios to support many CFOs who have those functions under their wing. So we're quite sort of more expanded in terms of the support that we provide. But I think for us, the main message Helen wanted me to get across to you today was that we're really supportive of what the London Finance Academy wants to achieve and how we've transitioned ourselves and want to support as delivery partners moving forward. So that was a key message she wanted me to get across. So just some key, really key headlines in terms of, this is in the slide pack, but in terms of some of the things that we are doing on the timeline, I think I would say if there was a legacy in terms of what we've achieved in London since we formed the London network in 2007 is around our work placements. These are finance and accounting students from undergraduate degrees. We managed to place 68 students this year. It's a record for us across 32 organisations, and I'm hoping in the future that will form our Band 4-5 pipeline moving forward. So again, we're recruiting next year. They've just started this year, and we've got our exchange programme. We bring students that are leaving and students that are coming in together to exchange ideas and make the current work placements better. I think the key thing that I wanted to get across is we had our lead conference this week. I always say to people, if 1NHS Finance and Skills Development Network weren't here, you would still have senior finance people in the system responsible for the performance and development of that team. And what we do is we support that in the background in terms of making it easier for senior people to do that and to do that successfully. And I think that's the key thing in terms of what we want to do in supporting individuals and creating a network and community of people to be able to do that. I think that's sort of my elevator pitch when someone asks me what I do. My kids still don't know what I do after all these years, even though I've told them about 10 million times. So I think that's the key thing. In terms of other key deadlines, we've got an ambassador lead role program rolling out in January. Now, we had our lead conference this week, and we presented them with, Hannah spoke, Ranjana spoke, about the different networks, and they didn't realise the volume of work and networks that have been created with the creation of ONF and the regional board. And I think they want some way of being able to take more responsibility and accountability for bringing these people together in their respective organisations. So every organisation should have a value maker, a face, an I&D ambassador. Hopefully when we evolve the health and wellbeing champions network as well. So all these respective people will be part of a network, will be learning from that network, and we want somehow to be able to bring it back to the organisation, so the organisation and the finance team within that organisation benefits. So we're trying to evolve and support the FSD role, A, to be a little bit more accountable, but secondly, to be able to engage with these individuals, to be able to signpost people to resources, to be able to influence CFOs and the senior team upwards in terms of prioritising some of the initiatives and rolling them out within the organisation. So we're quite ambitious in terms of how we're trying to evolve and grow the old FSD, SDM role within the organisation. And again, how they link up to the procurement leads and informatic leads in those organisations, because we share a lot of resources. So the management development programmes we run, all the soft skills programmes we run are shared across the 3 professional groups, but we also do have technical programmes. And our technical programmes run from September of this year to July next year. So I use an academic year in terms of how we run the programmes. And we've aligned to the national curriculum of OFM moving forward as well. The other things that we plan to do is the Professional Alliance Conference. That's where we bring all the professional bodies into one room, and we can basically challenge them in terms of, and get updates in terms of what they're doing with their curriculum, how they support CPD, what they're planning to do on special research groups, and whether they have any planned employer roundtables. So it's our opportunity to link into what the professional bodies are doing. Importantly, something that's evolved out the I&D Ambassadors Group is the Band 2 to 5 conference. Again, we've created a forum of people that come together. We're looking at our conference in January and in terms of what we're going to have, and we're planning to go out and survey what we're doing there as well. I think they're some of the key activities in terms of our timeline. Obviously, I'll be nagging about staffing censuses. We've got the national staffing census collection as well that we're doing through the different regions and through the HFMA delivering that for us moving forward. In terms of some of the key things that we're going to see that we're producing, we've got a vacancy and secondment portal that's live at the moment, but we're looking at how we can extend it. Something we did in North Central London, but we're trying to extend out. I think one of my asks of supporting each of the ICS talent boards is if we've got initiatives that are going to be springing up in the 5 different areas, it's how we work together. And I think secondments, rotations, swaps will be something that, because some people, there may be an opportunity for one person in a different ICB, so it's how we shift them across and how we work collectively in London. So we're making the secondment and vacancy board live. We've also got an initiative called the Coffee Lounge. So that came out of the Band 2 to 5 forum as well, where junior staff wanted the opportunity to access CFOs and deputies just for an informal half-an-hour chat to talk about anything. So we've created, and thank you to all the CFOs, I think we've got over 40 people that have signed up to support in that process. I put this diagram up to the SDM Leeds conference on Wednesday, and they were all quite surprised. And I suppose this visually gives you an idea in terms of all the networks and all the work. And you've heard people talk, and it's quite a good visual map in terms of, you know, how many changes have happened and how many initiatives, sorry, I'm in the way, how many initiatives have moved forward. So, and we've talked about this, and as I said, a key part of what we're going to try and do is really how SDN leads within your organisations can act as a glue, so you're informed in terms of the initiatives that are happening in these different places and how best you can bring them back and make them really make a difference in your workplace. And again, this was on our blueprint document where we talked about how we can get SDN leads to engage, communicate, signpost to tools and resources, engage with the team, get the teams to be out there supporting the networks, and again, how we can build inclusive teams moving forward. We've covered the talent board, so I won't cover that much, and this was on Hardef's slides as well in terms of some of the numbers moving forward. Okay, and I think that sort of just covers off everything, okay? Thank you.
Stage. For anyone who's attending virtually, I should be getting questions through on my phone. So please, if you've got anything that you want to ask, either of us collectively or anything individually that you've heard, please do that. So lots going on, as you can hear, but lots of challenges, lots of areas where we're not where we want to be. Right, I'll go for this one. Right, I haven't got any questions yet virtually, so any comments, thoughts, questions in the room? Excellent. And can you say who you are?
Hi, I'm Henry Black. I'm the CFO for North East London. Is this working? I think it is. Fantastic range of views and really helpful as ever. My question, or it's possibly a comment or a question not necessarily for the speaker but for all of us, and it's for Ranjana to thank you so much for the presentation you gave. Every time you speak, it's really inspirational. I suppose my question is, the way you've described the kind of the programs and the sponsorship and becoming an ambassador, and it's a really powerful thing and hugely beneficial to all the people involved. But I kind of get the sense that there's a bit of a frustration there, that it's not necessarily then penetrating the kind of leadership and having the impact you might want it to have in terms of, shifting that dial. So I guess it's partly a question to you if you have ideas about how we could take that next step, and it's also just a question for everyone in the room really about how we collectively kind of pick up that mantle, I guess, and really give this the kind of the leadership support and the clout it deserves, so that we can shift that dial.
So yeah, you probably did pick up a bit of frustration. I think the thing is, we are really passionate people. We're just, that's why we volunteered. Because remember, this isn't a workforce that's been recruited. This is people who've stepped up and said, actually, I want to see this change. So naturally, we have to deal with a bit of frustration. Maybe things don't work always as quickly as we hope. But that isn't to say we aren't a really good group of people who are really super engaged. So I think, for me, the first step is just bridging that gap and creating that engagement. So even within, I can only talk from my own experience, but even within my trust, just me explaining what the ambassador role is and kind of showcasing that there's actually all of this One NHS Finance behind all of it. There's the academy, there's the innovations that, people, for some reason, that messaging isn't filtering through at this stage. So it's hard if that's not happening to then say, oh, and by the way, did you know we're talking to the Kingston University about this? Would you like to sign up and be a mentor? So I think the first step is some way of sharing those communications. I think for me, it would be in our spaces, having that time as a group in our management team meetings and our team meetings, whatever it is, that really actually this is on the agenda. Like if this was part of the standard agenda, that quarterly every I&D ambassador in your team gave an update, that accountability, that and that listening will happen, and it will start to all kick off. I think that there's a snowball effect that will happen.
Yeah, I put my microphone down, sorry. But hopefully you can hear me. On that point, it's strange, but I was anticipating a similar question. And my response was, every time you catch a train in the morning, the most annoying part, as well as the other people that are crowded is that annoying tannoy message about sort of see it, say it, sort it. And it got me thinking about actually, we need to make sure that we give people the power to say it when it's not right. So, when we say, here's a list of programs for senior staff, I got the feedback, well, where's the ones for bands 2 to 5? If we're looking at the sponsorship programs, someone will say, well, why isn't that trust involved in it? What's going on there? People need to feel empowered that they can actually say something where things are not looking right. And I think we've come a long way, particularly in London, where people feel more empowered to raise those issues where things are not where they should be. I just encourage us to create that culture. If we believe and we see it's not right, then we've got the power to sort it out. So we need to take that responsibility.
Great.
Can I just, add to that, Hoda? So I think, so being able to say it is one thing, but also showcasing what has been done, I think is really powerful. So I talked earlier about, just hearing from some of the people that have been sponsored or, and, just hearing their stories. I think that can be really powerful in getting engagement too. So I think there's something about showcasing back as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just reflecting even more that I don't know whether we at our organisation, have created firstly the space to do these things. Where we have created the space for colleagues, I have to admit we're struggling to get people to engage. So we have team meetings open to anybody. How do I ensure that we get all the voices heard, and that it's not just a presentation from me? So any thoughts and ideas would be much appreciated, but I think that is the challenge we've got about how we set up the mechanism, create the space, but then really encourage and hear those voices, because I don't think we're doing well enough as it stands at the moment.
Right. Any more? I don't think I've got any questions yet. On
Hi.
that, but yeah.
Is that working? Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So Lorcan Woods Kings. So I think it's really impressive. Ever since I joined the NHS 4 years ago, I've been really impressed about how much emphasis that we put on people and culture and EDI in particular. So in terms of our words, it's certainly there, and kind of as you go through, you can see kind of more and more actions coming on in terms of that kind of snowball effect, which hopefully will really stand us in very good stead in years to come. So, but in a way, I feel compared to organisations I've seen in the outside and finance academies I've seen in other organisations, we over-index on that. But I was then trying to think to myself, well, where do we under-index in a way? And there's relatively little, some references to it, but relatively little in terms of what we're trying to do for the wider organisation, for patients in particular. There's also relatively little about what is the future finance function that we're trying to create. Is it much bigger? Is it much smaller? Normally you would be sitting here kind of going, we want to shift the percentage of time that our people spend on transactions towards much more value-added activities. In the innovation piece, Gus, we've been much clearer about what are the common problems, the common biggest problems that we want to solve.
Yeah.
You know, we would, and to continue the theme, because I guess what I'm saying is it feels just a little bit insular. I'm not trying to do it down. I think it's brilliant. I think it takes us much further forward than we've ever been before. So I'm just trying to kind of think of how to build on it. It feels a bit insular. Like when we talked about innovation, we didn't talk about innovation coming from outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the vast majority of innovation comes from outside. If we're thinking about how do we better manage, better promote good workforce management practices, the vast majority of that is going to come through digital automation, sorts of things which are going to come up from outside of the organisation and so on. So I just feel as if we could do it, and that might make it quite a bit more relevant for people outside of finance. So if I was sitting there as a CEO or as a nurse, I would say, kind of what's in it for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great challenge. If I could
Okay.
come in quickly to start with. We did have so in the development board we do hear from all of the systems about the work that they're doing. We heard from North East London this morning. It was quite an interesting presentation because what they've done is gone back and linked it to the North East London key strategic priorities, and we're trying to articulate what the work, how the work that they were doing really linked back in to those really big priorities which we've all got across the NHS. And I think that, you know, a number of us in the room, I think, just had a bit of a light bulb moment where we thought we've got to do that. We've got to make those connections into the wider piece about the priorities, so that we can sort of articulate the story in terms of what it means to organisations and what it, you know, and what difference we're making to patients ultimately, which is why we're all
Absolutely.
here. I think the innovation point's really interesting, actually.
I think
we
it
are
is.
quite insular there, aren't we?
Well, I think you're absolutely right,
Yeah.
Lorcan. There's lots of learning from outside. It's how, I think for me, it's how we can bring that together and learn from each other at the same time as learning from outside. And maybe, as you said, it's those common problems as well. So we're all grappling with the same things. But I think we've got a lot to learn from the sort of non-NHS community, I'm sure. First step, I think, was trying to capture some of the learning that we've already got from within our own community. But it's a really good challenge. I'll give it some more thought about how, and really encourage other people to get involved about experiences you've got, because you know, many people have got that experience outside the NHS community as well. How can we bring that into our learning to build on that talent and experience?
Yeah, look, you're right in terms of how do you harness that learning. And what we found in the National Finance Academy is a lot of the schemes that we've talked about today have been built on doing lots of evidence research from outside of the NHS as well, and in some cases international as well. And we're continuing to do that. A good example is we're trying to create a talent management framework. And we've looked at everything the NHS has done in the past. We've seen some good examples in Wales. We also know, talking to the Big Four, what works and what doesn't work for them. What their different angle is that patient piece is the thing that we grapple with most. And I think I'm updating the Leadership Council this afternoon that we've got a workshop which is being run by KPMG, where they've brought talent management frameworks from the top 100 companies globally to look at what is applicable and how we can learn from the best. And we've got over 100 people participating in the workshop to look at what talent management could look like for the NHS finance community, from learning from international and outside of the NHS. So we are trying to make sure we capture that, certainly in the finance academy.
But more to do.
More to do, definitely.
Okay. Just looking at it. Right. We've already got that in on time as well. So, thank you very much. I'd particularly like to thank everyone who's got up on stage this morning and shared the kind of work that's going on. Hopefully it's inspired you, hopefully it's information that you can take back into your organisations, and a real challenge now about how we all fold into this agenda. It is lunchtime. Can we get you back for 1:15, please, for the second part of the day, and that's split into two parts. So we're going to have a panel Q&A from an ICB perspective on this agenda. We are unfortunately missing Helen, who's poorly, but we do have all of the other ICS CFOs with us for that session, and Jenny Greenshields is going to chair that one for us. And then we have a motivational speaker before we close. So enjoy your lunch. I should have said to start with, if you are tweeting, it's hashtag LondonFALaunch22, and there is a card for Anne Johnson, which has been put, I think, at the reception area. It's at reception. So if you'd like to sign the leaving card for Anne, who apparently doesn't want to fuss, please sign the card and enjoy the networking opportunity.
So welcome everybody to the afternoon session of today, and I just want to thank everybody. Oh, that's better. The lights haven't changed a bit. Want to thank everybody who spoke this morning, because it was really, really inspiring. I thought it was great to get us all together and start talking about these things. It's wonderful to see so many people in real life. So today's first afternoon session is a panel discussion, and as you can see, I've been added as the element of diversity to this panel. And we've got our four don't
say it, Jenny.
No, the ICB CFOs. Unfortunately, Helen can't be here, as you've already heard. She's not well. And so what I'm going to ask them to do is to introduce themselves. The title of this particular panel discussion is What Do We Need from Finance Teams Over the Next Few Years? And I'm also going to ask you all to do a couple of minutes on what you think about that particular topic before we then start the discussion, and I'll hopefully ask for lots of very difficult questions as well. So Henry, would you like to start?
Okay. I was expecting to go the other way around. There you go. That's stumped me, isn't it?
I like to keep you on your toes.
Thanks. So I'm Henry Black. I'm the North East London ICB CFO. I also have performance in my remit, and I look after BI and informatics and other things as well. The reason I'm describing that is because I think it's really important that we look at how the kind of work we do across, not just in finance but across other aspects, supports the kind of the agenda that we have. So I think I'm not going to talk too much about the kind of technical bits of what we think, of what I think the kind of future of the finance teams needs to be. I think all of that is absolutely essential, but I've been indoctrinated. We have our new chief exec, Zena, comes from a local authority background, and she's very, very she brings a completely new focus. So I've spent the last 6 months being completely brainwashed and indoctrinated into, what does the ICS actually bring that is different from what we had before? And so my kind of focus is on how the finance function can support the ICB's new duties on the kind of the broader aspects, and in particular, kind of two things really about reducing health inequalities and how we can use data and information, as well as a financial strategy to shift resources, but also how NHS can contribute to wider economic development, and that includes some of the things that Hannah was talking about earlier around building on being anchor institutions, how we can really use the kind of scale that we have and the fact that we are a huge employer to really to support local economic development, to offer opportunities to our local communities for really kind of high skilled and enriching careers, and how we can kind of support our local education establishments, and what we can do as a finance function to really push that forward.
Thank you. Steve.
I'm Steve Bloomer. I'm from the North West London ICS. I'm offering a little bit of diversity because I've had to bring my glasses so I could see any notes. But in terms of, I haven't got much left to say because Henry's obviously read mine. But in terms of the key things, I think, for the finance function, I think if you look at the big ticket challenges we have, so we know that we've lost a lot of productivity over the period of since before the pandemic, and we also know, as Henry just touched on, we've got one of the things that really came out in that is the level of health inequality across all of our areas, and for us it's quite a large levels between inner and outer London. So I think from the finance, what do we want from the finance teams? Well, we need people who are going to get out there, who are going to work with people, and what do we bring that other professions don't have? Well, our value added area is the fact that we're good with data. Some of us can add up, but we're very good with data. We can be inquisitive, and we can offer the things that a lot of those managers don't always do, which is to help them find those solutions. So I think we're looking for data-driven people who can get out, people who want to make a difference and are prepared to have those difficult discussions, which is going to take, because we're going to have an awful lot of hard choices as we get ourselves back into sort of balance. And I think if you stick with that theme, that does allow you to also tackle the key issue, which is the sort of health inequalities agenda. As Henry mentioned earlier, it's the data that's going to get us there. I think the last thing I'd say is, for all the people in the finance functions, there are no easy jobs, and all of the things we're talking about are really hard yards that we've got to do. So the last thing I think we need to sort of focus on is how do we as a group stay resilient and together and look out for each other, because actually that's why events like this are so hugely important, but it's how do we really look out for each other.
Thanks, Steve. Mike.
Yeah, so it's even more difficult going third in a group, just what they've said. So I'm Mike Fox, I'm the Chief Finance Officer South East London, ICS. Come from a provider background before then, so this is my first foray out providers. I think from where I'm coming from ICBs, ICSs, what are we doing? It's still in that mind of the whole NHS is in a recovery mode, and how does the ICS, ICB help with that? But then if we look at the finance community, are we also in recovery mode and recovering what we should be doing as a function, which we've probably not been doing as much as we would have through COVID for obvious reasons. So I think when Steve and Henry both said about data, it's sort of moving away from the stories and the anecdote backing up decision making to actually some hard data that actually says this is the evidence to say this will work or this is the right thing to do. We need to look at the productivity recovery, and therefore actually we're not talking about necessarily new productivity or productivity gain. Now all the stats would tell us we still haven't recovered the level of productivity pre-COVID, so actually where do we do that? And for the finance community, how do we bring we're good at analytics, we're good at counting sometimes, but actually we're also good, I think, at putting in a bit of a hard-nosed, sensible decision-making framework around some of the things we should and should not do, and bringing together different aspects to say, well, yes, this is a problem, this is what we should be doing, but actually there's enough scope with what you've got already if you do the productivity to enable that. Because there is no more money. We know there's a big financial crunch coming next financial year. So if we don't get back into that, it's all game over anyway. I think it does mean that, I think, is the finance function in the NHS popular all the time? Not necessarily, but it's incredibly important that it brings that function to it, and it can still be very rewarding. So we've got to make sure our teams are supported in some of that as well, because it will be tough from a finance perspective and a finance professional's perspective.
Thanks, Mike. Phil, sorry, you're last.
When I came up on stage, there were 2 empty seats. Henry's seat was empty, and this one was empty. I thought, I'll sit next to Jenny, because she'll go there first. That didn't work.
Not predictable, sorry.
No, fair enough. I'm Phil Wells. I'm the Chief Finance Officer for the North Central London ICB. It's really good to see some of my North London colleagues here. What the hell are you doing here? You've got a massive deficit. So I think there's 3 things, actually, and it very much echoes what the guys have said. I think we need to be looking to create a finance function for the future which has 3 attributes, and they all begin with C, so that I can remember them. It needs to be credible, it needs to be curious, and it needs to be collaborative. It needs to be credible because we don't get to sit around the table just by right. We have to earn it, and we have to be there adding value to that decision-making process, as Mike just said. I think we need it to be curious because genuinely, reporting isn't enough. It needs to be out there understanding stuff. I've come from an acute background, and I've stepped into a role in which I'm expected to know something about primary care, and I now deeply regret every moment not spent in the acute sector finding out about primary care, because it's quite important, it turns out. So we need to be constantly pushing our teams to find out more, to learn beyond the boundaries of the responsibilities they've got, and to be really thinking about how they can join up thought processes, money, resources to make the best outcomes possible. And collaborative because, frankly, we're not in competition with each other anymore. We're trying to, as Mike says, recover a health economy that is under real pressure. So the only way we're going to do that is by genuinely working together, thinking about who's got a competitive advantage, either historically or otherwise, putting resources in the right place and getting beyond those sovereign boundaries that we've spent so long creating. So I think collaboration is a really important part of our future.
Okay, thank you everybody. And one of the things when I agreed to chair this session, Hannah, was that I was told I didn't need to speak. So I'm also going to before I do actually have to ask any questions, I'm going to throw it open to the floor and see whether there are any questions out there for the panel. Come on. Okay, Adrian over here. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
We've heard a lot about data-driven decision making, but a lot of the ICB purpose is disruption and innovation. So what are your thoughts on how you address that in an absence of that kind of data?
We start with Phil this time.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, Adrian works for me, so we'll talk about that question in his next appraisal.
Well, surely that means you should know the answer.
So the simple answer is let's go and find the data. So the question back is, what will it take for us to create the data set that we need in order to answer the question? Lorcan and I were having a really interesting conversation over lunch, and it was kind of starting to touch on those sorts of things. We all know the problem. The problem is we spend an awful lot of money treating people far too up their health journey because we haven't intervened with them early enough, or we haven't supported them early enough to manage their own conditions. So what does it take for us to understand that? And we had a really interesting conversation on Wednesday about the MSK pathway in North Central London. And it was about very much that principle. We're now starting to get to the point where we've got some data, and Caroline I see nodding, where we start to understand what it will take to intervene earlier in someone's health deterioration effectively, to allow us to get early treatment that's less expensive and keeps them out of hospital for longer. That's a really good thing, because in the MSK instance you're then avoiding obesity, you're avoiding the cost of depression when someone's bad back actually causes them mental health problems, as well as the physical cost of repairing a knee or a hip at some point in the future. So we've got to find a way, Adrian, of actually getting the data.
Thanks, Phil. Steve, because you mentioned data when you first spoke. So the challenge, I guess, is, I would say, what would we do differently now to what we've done before, and what new skills do we need in order to be able to do that? Because I feel some of these things we've discussed frequently in the past. How do we get over the conversations and into actually doing something different?
So I think, a little bit as Phil's touched on, so we've got the curious nature and going out and getting the data, and I think also when I talk about data driven, one of the things that I'm quite keen on is that we don't allow all of the key discussions to be driven by anecdote and some of the emotion of it. So so I think, and actually from my perspective in the role I am now, that isn't always the case. So we do get drawn into quite a lot of things, and I think where we've started to make some changes, work differently and add a bit of value, is we have dragged a lot of that emotion back to, well, it's actually X number of patients with this condition. It's, and then you can get down to really starting to fix some of the things and making a change. And I think that's where we add our value, because we can hold people to that. I did talk a lot about data, and it was from that perspective of actually saying, well, I'm not just going to get drawn into this, I want to understand it. I think there's also something about being able to look at wider data pieces and work through, what is the wicked issue we're trying to fix, and in a system way. But I also think there's something about there are going to be times where we don't have a perfect data set, so we're also going to have to make some assumptions, understand them, do something, measure it, and be brave enough to say, actually, that didn't quite work, we need to revisit. And I would say that's another thing that we haven't done terribly well. Certainly there are instances in North West London where I would argue we've left things running without constantly going back. And even if you do it in trusts, I think we all know, after a business case is approved, how many times do we sit with a business case, with the data, going, actually, did that quite do what we expected? I would imagine you could probably count it on one hand over a good period of time. So that's where I think it's that change.
And can I just pick up on something you said, Henry, about working with the local authorities? So how do you think we can use this and change our relationships with the local authorities in the future in order to make the ICS more inclusive?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to pick up on Steve's point, though, before I say, because I think the evaluation is absolutely, we are terrible at evaluation. How many business cases actually get properly benefits realisation evaluated afterwards? Anyway. So I think, just on your question, Jenny, I don't think actually the availability and the existence of data or lack of is really the issue. I think there's loads of data. There is absolutely stacks of data all over the place from health, but also social care and public sector partners and third sector. The issue is about curation of that data and actually being able to get everybody on the same page where there is a willingness to bring it all together and to have it. And as Steve says, it's never going to be perfect. We could spend forever trying to make the perfect data set, but actually bringing together and linking at a patient level and at a community level and a ward level. What does, by doing that, if you take the social care data, things from the kind of, the fire service have fantastic data, the Met Police have really good data. Bringing all that into one place and then linking it to individual patients, you find that you get an incredible amount of insight into, what are the health conditions that are particularly affecting certain communities and what are those kind of the wider determinants that are having the impact on that. And then you can really focus your kind of energies on, and it might be that we need to do more initiatives in schools, it might be something about people's activities or whatever it is, but by bringing those kind of partners together and looking at the data across the piece and creating that much more rounded and kind of holistic view of the communities. And I guess what I'm describing really is population health management, but we've done population health management for many, many years, and we've kind of done it from a health perspective and, and different bits sort of putting their oar in. The difference with an ICS is that those partners are all around the same table and they are all part of a statutory body, as well as the partnership board, which now has the real levers, or it should have the real levers once they emerge and evolve, to really do something about it.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to stick with the subject of data because we've had a question from our virtual audience from Prue Patel at CNWL. And Mike, I'm going to put this to you first. So what are the panel's views on automating data where possible, and how much dedicated support is there within organisations for finance as a function?
You run that again.
What are the panel's views on automating data where possible, and how much dedicated support is there within organisations for finance as a function?
Right, so I mean, you can't by definition be opposed to automation, I suppose, really, can you? Because that would be utterly ridiculous, and even when there is lots of data. I would like to just, before we get into that question, come back on something the other colleagues have said. I was going to challenge back as well. I think we've got tons of data. I think the enemies are actually trying, and you can sometimes see as people trying to block review or decision or change, is actually the never-ending pursuit of the perfect data set or the perfect metric that you'll probably never ever get anywhere, and you won't be able to understand if you get it. So actually, what are the 3 or 4 metrics you're trying to move the dial on, and are they good enough to support a decision and review it in the end, is probably where we need to get to, and that's that challenge function. In terms of the automation of data, if we can automate data, excellent. We need to do that, and we need to utilise that. I couldn't probably speak very much more about that, if I'm entirely honest. How much support is there for?
Or within organisations for finance as a function? I think that's a slightly separate question, actually, if we move on. How much do you think within, well, if you want to talk within your existing ICB, what do you think as the ICB CFO of the level of support for finance that there is, particularly given the fact that we know that there are financial issues going on at the moment?
I've been in that community for 4 months, so I'm not sure again I could really speak expertly on the levels of support. I would say that, finance over the course of COVID has probably been a bit marginalised in decision making and in, basically the running of an organisation. I don't think that means it's unsupported within organisations. I think it probably is variable. I think what we do need to do is make sure that at the top of the shop there is that support for the finance function doing the things we've just said. Because if it is finance just almost being that lone voice in a town square ranting away, then it becomes problematic rather than part of the solution. So if the boards of various organisation providers and the ICB aren't actually supportive that this is what finance should be doing, and therefore it shouldn't be held against them for doing it, then we won't get anywhere. So actually I'd be saying we have been marginalised for the right, not the wrong reasons, but now boards need to make sure that they're absolutely at the table at decision making, and it is a key factor in all decisions being made.
Okay, thanks. Phil, would you like to comment on how you think finance is supported in your area?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and speaking with quite a few North Central London colleagues in the room, and probably online as well, I guess so. I'm like Mike. I've been there for 4 months, and I joined as we were submitting our plans, and that was not an easy process because we had a plan that frankly was well in excess of the envelope we were going to be given. So we went through quite an arduous process to try and get it back down to something that complied with the rules of the game. But it did a couple of things for me, that process. One is it demonstrated that as a leadership across North Central London, there was an appetite to say, this is public money, we've got to spend this in the best way we possibly can, and wherever we can, we'll do that wisely and sensibly and with the patient front and centre. So I think that came across really strongly. The other thing that, sort of the second round thing that it revealed, I think, was that the desire to do that goes beyond just some sense of, I must comply with what the machine has told me to do. It was a sense of, actually, the better we can be at delivering the services we deliver now, the more scope we have to change things for the future, the more efficiency we find, the more opportunity we've got to invest in some other things, we were just talking about with Adrian, that might result in better outcomes in future. And that's really what we're trying to do. I think we've got to get mentally beyond this idea that all we're trying to do is just comply. We're not. We're trying to spend money wisely because it's the right thing to do. And we're also trying to find a way of investing now to save money into the future. And that can't happen with yet more cash being chucked at us. It just won't happen. So we've got to find a way of doing that within the existing rules. And so I think across North Central London, there is an appetite for the finance function to be at that table and to be really driving the insights into those. And come back to that data conversation, not just looking at what's happened in the past because that's what's happened, but turning it into something that tells you what might happen in the future and what you can do about it.
Yeah, thanks. Steve, would you like to comment?
So I've been doing it for slightly longer than 4 months, but I would say put it slightly differently. So I think across North West London, we've got a fabulously talented group of finance professionals. Some of them are in the room here, and we've made a difference and we've demonstrated it. And therefore, I think people do want us involved. They do want us at the table. And if you were to pick what's the difference, where's the bits where people are keener to have us there? It's where we've told where we've told the story, where we've been a bit more involved, where we've got some of the messages out, where we've been consistent. And perhaps the areas that we haven't quite touched, and primary care would be one of them in this particular instance, we haven't been able to quite get some of the messages out. But I think there's a role for us to make people want us there, and we do that by telling that story. But there's no doubt if you were to go through a number of our committees, people they always want finance there, and they definitely value the support. And I think one of the other things that through that it's allowed us to do is get people working in different areas, and actually sometimes getting people from an acute background working on mental health or vice versa. That's also been really helpful because they do look at things slightly differently. And again, that's the other reason. So I'm quite upbeat about it, to be honest.
Okay, Henry.
Yeah, thanks. I share much of what's been said. I think we have to kind of recognise that that we do have really skilled workforce, but the NHS operates in a highly politicised environment, and it's a command and control system with a very heavily regulated top-down kind of approach. So we have the fact is we have tended to be much better at counting and reporting and accounting than we necessarily have been at forecasting and modelling. And even when we talk about forecasting and modelling, it's still fairly kind of technocratic, and what did the service which cost £1 million last year, what will it cost next year, rather than developing some of those much more, we talk about kind of value added, but those broader skills around value and how we can support services and the broader kind of public sector generate social value as well as economic value for our communities, and how and that's about understanding what are the differential kind of benefits that you can derive from investing in one service versus another, and how you combine not just the financial and economic kind of skills, but also the much broader clinical, whether it's clinical and also bringing in other partners as well. So I do think, and I wonder whether that's kind of what is implied in the question about automating. You know, we should combine automation with freeing up the skills that we have to be able to then do more of that stuff. So we will never get away from the requirement to be forensically focused on accounting and reporting. It's never going to happen. But yeah, if we could do more of that in an automated way and then free up our skilled staff to do more of that economic modelling stuff, that would be good.
The ideal, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can I have another question, please? Paul.
Paul Stefanowski, West London. I'm going to move away from data because it was intimidating for me. I'm going to get wishy-washy now. I'm intrigued by this thing about collaboration, because if you asked all of us, we'd say that we were collaborative people. And yet, collaboration and the need for collaboration has been a long time, and it hasn't really stuck. And we've gone through collaboration, we've gone through competition, we're back to collaboration again. And we're also competitive people. And if you sat in on any London chief exec call, you would see competition. You wouldn't see collaboration. So my question is, I suppose, how do we use the ICSs to start incentivizing? Because we all need incentives in our life. We try to do things out of the goodness of our hearts, but actually we do need incentives to do the right thing sometimes as well. So how do we use the new structures we've got to incentivize the right behaviors? Then going back to the conversation we were having this morning, do we value collaboration as a skill enough when we are developing our staff?
Well, that's a good question. Steve, would you like to start with that?
Not really. I'll have a go. So, how do you incentivise collaboration? Well, I suppose in terms of the ICSs, what do we bring? What are we there for? Well, ultimately, we bring, we can bring people together. We can, and also we're there to set big ticket strategies, what to look like across the area. And then I think it's for us to start to facilitate that collaboration, and we do that partly by setting out the story, partly by sometimes holding up a bit of a mirror to where things aren't quite where they should be, and being challenging. But that's sort of what we do. I think the incentive bit is really interesting, and I think it takes everybody to accept that, for example, perhaps if we were, it's not the greatest example, but perhaps for those that have gone a bit further, either financially or have delivered something or pushed the envelope from a quality perspective, we need to find a way to give them a little bit more freedom to do things, or we need to find a way to, and that could be through, I don't know, capital planning or something, but we need to start to think about those type of things. But there is some, I think our main role though is to set the structure and let the professionals really get into some of those difficult questions.
Phil, can I just ask you, which was the second part of Paul's question, do we value collaboration enough? And I'm asking you specifically because you're quite recent into the NHS in comparison to the others.
No. No.
I agree.
We really don't, and we need to do it a lot more. But and I'd say, don't get me started, Paul. There's about 16 other skill sets that we don't value enough of as we develop people, and that would definitely be one of them. And what we see in the very best leaders, I think, in the NHS is a genuine sense of patient first, institution later. And I just want the best possible thing to happen that I possibly can. I think that goes genuinely beyond the goodness of my heart. But I think we need to make sure that whatever we do answers that question first. Is this going to be better for the patient? And then it's incumbent on us as an enabler function to make that happen. And I think that for me is the essence of collaboration.
Okay, Mike, do you want to come in on that? How do we value it more? If you say we don't value it?
Well, it's not easy because we've all been brought up basically being judged on our own numbers, not a set of numbers for the entire organisation or an entire system. We've probably never had an appraisal or you know, an objective that says how much are you going to improve the system's position or bring the system back into balance. I just don't think we have. So it is a little bit hardwired. I think it's quite tricky about some of the things we say about incentivisation of organisations, because actually, how do we align that to what people can achieve? And how do we judge, you know, so one organisation might be in deficit, another one in surplus, and it's got nothing to do with anything other than their historic income base and how the funding's flowed. And you can easily find examples where the one that's in deficit is maybe more efficient and effective than the one that's in surplus. So how you know, a blunt measure of their going the extra yard, well, how do we actually measure that extra yard? We know capital is going to be a constraining factor across the board, so how do we use it sensibly and we get the best money out of it? I'm not sure, you know, not sure if a better access to capital for doing certain things is the right way to do it, because it could be the thing stopping the other one. So it's got to be nuanced, but how do we get people more collaborative? I do think that it is about, I think Steve said, shining a light, shining a mirror, talking to each other in our professional circles, recognising that in some ways the CFO space is a bit of a, I think it can be fun, it can be tongue-in-cheek, it can be a bit hard-nosed, and it's got to be that way. We've got to shine a light on each other and be willing to be challenged. The only way we're going to sort the bigger problem is collaboration, and if you're in a system that's going to be in deficit, eventually, no matter how good your position is, it's going to come back around to bite you anyway, so you might as well be part of solving the problem.
Yeah, thanks. Henry, is there anything you want to add to all of that?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, not a huge amount. I guess this point about incentives is interesting, because I think when it comes to kind of senior execs, you know, it's not so much about necessarily financial incentives, because that's kind of built in. It's about being seen to, you know, to deliver. So being able to deliver and being seen to deliver, and in an internal market, that's quite easy to work out, you know, because you've got the kind of the nice, easy ways of doing it before. And I guess, you know, in an ICS, you can still be part of a system that is able to deliver, and everyone is able to make their contributing kind of, you know, their contribution to that. So I think we do have to find ways of measuring the success of a system and the kind of, you know, the contribution of its component parts. And I think, you know, that is going to be difficult. In terms of collaboration, and I mean, you can't train people to be collaborative particularly. It's about you know, us as leaders demonstrating that behaviour and setting the right tone from the top, creating that right culture, but also then kind of determining that the programmes of work that we need our staff to do are working together to achieve that kind of common goal, so that we don't, you know, because it's easy for us as system leaders to talk, you know, nicely and to be all collaborative, but we still, if we don't change the way that our teams, you know, work, then, you know, there are still lots of people who are busy working up, you know, PBR-based income stuff, and you know, it's still happening. So it is incumbent on us to create that culture, but also then to follow that through with the right kind of operating structures.
Well, that leads nicely on to the next question, which I've just had from Hannah, which is from Jazz and Hardiv, I think.
Oh, no, sorry, they've got more questions.
Oh, have you? Sorry. I've misunderstood. Sorry. I'll come to you in a minute. How important is a shared ICS-wide strategy to frame decisions and prioritisation to bring people together towards common goals? I think you've touched on it a little bit, but more importantly, how quickly do you think we can genuinely move towards this?
I think it's really important, and I think, and not just an overall strategy, but also the clinical ones that underpin it, and some good levels. It's you know, it is one of the things we are really focused on in North West London. Are we going at the pace that we would have wanted? Honestly, probably not, but we need to put a bit more effort into that. But I think it sort of plays to Paul's question a little bit as well, because I think there is definitely a job for us to create a simpler, you know, this is what we're trying to do, get people to agree it, you know, and the collaboration you would hope will come from us collectively going for what we've all signed up for. So I think we do need that big ticket strategy, but I'm really interested in the clinical things that underpin it, because that's going to allow us as well, when we're making big ticket resource allocation decisions, which we need to make, and we need to think about where the money should fall, whether, you know, and challenge ourselves a bit on that. has to be linked to those things, and that thing as well has got to be measurable and not the sort of mumbo jumbo that sits on a shelf, because otherwise how are we going to know when we've got there? And that sort of goes back to the data point really, which is we need to know every time we do something, and the population health point earlier, that when we've pulled a lever, it's put us in the right place and we've made one step further forward.
Yeah. Thanks. It does draw all those things together, doesn't it?
Jenny, can I just add
yes,
something?
Yes, of course, yeah.
So one of the things that again, we have talked about in North Central London, but I think is whenever you set something new like this, there's always a risk that it just tries to do 100,000 things at once and none of them end up being done very well. So I think there is a genuine need for us in finance to really, as you're saying, Steve, to really challenge what are the absolute priorities and how fast can we get those done first, rather than trying to do everything all at once. And I think by doing that, we can identify the benefits that they've had or not, and then move on to the second set of things and the third set of things. But to my mind, the real risk at the moment is that we try and do everything all at once, and we do it half well.
Mike?
Well, just adding to that, one of the things we're talking about, sort of linked to that, is what's the maximum capacity for the system to be able to transform and create that headroom to be able to prioritise, because ultimately, we all know there's only so much that we've got capacity to do while also keeping the lights on. So actually, before we get into we'd like to do 1,000 different things and then prioritise 100 different things. Well, actually, can we even afford 10 of those different things? And then what are the 10 things that we can afford to do that will have the biggest impact?
Okay, thanks. Jazz, would you like to ask you a question? There you are.
I think it's been answered already, Jim.
Okay.
It was going to be about the ICS strategy, because I think, Stephen, you're right. I don't think we all quite know what's the direction of travel, what the things we want to achieve. If levelling up is the biggest thing in that thing, are we making all the decisions that get us there, or are we still, because I do think, even though we've got collaboratives in place, organisations are still functioning as organisations, and those resource decisions are very much about the organisation and not about the whole journey. So whoever asked that question did it for me.
Okay, thanks. I think we've got time for the last question. Hardev, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. So the four of you are the beautiful faces of finance for London, which is great, and I think what we've heard today is really interesting to see what the direction we're going in. I think this morning we heard about the London Development Board and the agenda around finance innovation, the role of future-focused finance, equality and inclusion, and the National Finance Academy. So that comes under the umbrella of One NHS Finance. So for all the people online and here, just one sentence about your pledge, your commitment towards One NHS Finance, because I've been pushing for this to be part of every CFO's job description, to talk about how they're going to deliver on people development, and they're going to create a sustainable environment and reduce health inequalities, which are big things which you will touch on, but it'd be good to get your one sentence pledge towards One NHS Finance.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to self-select. Who would like to go first? So I don't get accused of...
So one sentence pledge. My pledge will be to do everything in my power to create the opportunities for everyone to have an enriching and fulfilling career.
Very good. Next.
So I will pledge to support all of this, because I think it will create a better work environment, teams will be happier, more enthused, but actually what I'd really like is people not feeling they've got to almost apologise for having a life outside of work, and things that will be a higher priority than that when they come to work, because that is just toxic, and I don't want any of that in my department.
Thank you.
I'll go. I'm going to make mine really quite specific, because it's something that matters to me personally, having spent a lot of time talking to my own partner about this. So I want to create in North Central London an environment where there is much more opportunity for women to succeed at the most senior levels of the finance function.
Thank you. Steve?
So what, having waited until last to try and come up with something really good, it's not worked, right? So thank you. So, yeah, I suppose where I would go is, what I'm really keen on in terms of from the finance perspective is that we get, I want us to be seen as, if you've worked in North West London, that people know that you've come out of that as a really good really rounded finance professional, and so that people, it's almost seen as a badge of honour, because I think that picks up a lot of the things you've said, and I do want to see it, far more open and diverse sort of workforce than we currently have. Does that count as one sentence? Because I did breathe halfway through it, right?
There's a lot of comments.
If I've got bad grammar, I've got away with it.
Was it the Oxford comment?
7 bullet points.
Okay. All right, okay. And I think I'll draw this session to a close then. Thank you very much for an engaging conversation and for responding so well and actually getting going. It was very nice to talk to you all. Thank you.
Gosh, I've just written down a few things and they relate directly to this morning, I think, in our conversation there. This is about making a choice. It's about taking action. It will take work, it will take effort, but it can be positive if we come together and act collaboratively on this. So thank you for your time. I'd like to thank all of the speakers who've given up their time today, everyone who's joined me on stage. I'd really like to thank the team who've been involved in making this happen today, including a live stream that I hope has been seamless. So thank you for joining us online. It's felt very strange, but lovely to see so many of you in the room. As I've said, thank you for coming. Thank you for engaging in this agenda. And if there's more information, we will send out some links. And if there's more information that you want, you've now got loads of contact details, and we will make the slide packs available. For those attending the London Finance Council meeting, that's downstairs in the CCAL room. I think that's where Caroline's gone. For the North West London CFOs, we're in the Wild Room. Okay. I don't know if we're in the Wild Room, actually. We might have been moved due to connections and things like that. For those of you who want to continue with the networking, there are loads of cafes, loads of pubs in the area. So, really take the chance if you can. And thank you so much for attending today. Okay.